We're talking to Larry Kinnear and Marlene Black from State of the Heart Care, talking about what you guys offer in the community. Larry, I know that you have some books that are available in schools and for children to help explain grief.
Yes, we do, Naomi, and this is community outreach that we actually began a few years ago, and I wanted to explain a little bit about it. But Marlene, when she would be out and talking with some of the school people, some of the officials and the guidance counselors, that they feel somewhat unprepared or inadequate when there's a death within the school system. Maybe a faculty member died, or maybe there was a family that there had been a death in. And the school officials said that they really weren't prepared to help those kids. Mm-hmm. So what we did a few years ago is Marlene put together a packet of books that were really helpful to school officials. And we put those together, and actually what we did, we started with Randolph County actually, and we applied for some grant money, and we were fortunate enough to get that. But we were able to take these books to all the schools, and there were more than 10 schools that we were able to do this with. So we delivered the books, and what we found from the school officials is that they were really grateful to get these. Mm-hmm. And the same thing that they had heard is that was they really weren't prepared to deal with this. So that's a great resource that we provided them. And then we also, last year, we were able to do this in Dark County, and we were able to do it to all the schools there. We're wanting to reach out next to Jay County, so we'll be looking for somebody that possibly could fund this. This would run anywhere from $1,000 to $1,400 to get these books in the schools. But it's a great community resource, and the other thing is I think it reemphasizes the fact that when there is a need in the schools, that the State of the Heart Hospice is your resource.
If someone's listening and they would like to get one of those books for their child, and what are a few that you would recommend?
Marlene might be able to handle that one.
Okay, Marlene?
We have several books that I just love. The one of them is called Sad Isn't Bad. I think it's an excellent book. It explains to children from the time of death through the funeral. Mm-hmm. We have another one called Tear Soup that is good for adults or children of any age. It's very explains death very well. At hospice, we've put together some journals for kids that they can actually work through their grief by journaling on them, and those are free. You can come in anytime to the office and pick those up.
And those books are available at the office as well?
Yes, we have a library at our office that we lend books. They're mostly on grief and death and sometimes on serious illness that you can come in anytime and pick up and borrow.
Okay, all right.
The only other thing I was going to say is that if you visit our website, we have a list of books there that are dealing with grief and loss.
Okay.
So that's a great resource.
Okay, stateoftheheartcare.org.
Yes.
Okay, stateoftheheartcare.org. We're talking to Larry and Marlene from State of the Heart Care, and we would love to continue this conversation. They'll be here another half an hour. And by the way, if you are going through a situation of grief with your family and your children, and you would like to talk to Larry and Marlene about Camp Bearable or anything else that they've been discussing this morning, you can feel free at any time to give us a call here at the station. It's 877-335-4569. We'll take a music break here. Here's the new one from Sidewalk Prophets. This is called You Can Have Me on Joy FM. Sidewalk Prophets on Joy FM with their new song. It's called You Can Have Me. 7:34, I'm Naomi Miller. In the studio with me this morning, some special guests from State of the Heart Hospice. And one is Marlene Black. She's a bereavement specialist. And the other is Larry Kinnear, who is the coordinator for promotion and development at State of the Heart, who has been in the area, State of the Heart, for about 30 years, helping you and your family with grief support. And we're looking forward to the rest of this hour with Marlene and Larry. Marlene, you brought up a good question to talk about right now, is how can you tell when your child is having trouble dealing with their grief?
I think two of the most common signs are children begin to act out when they're not handling their grief well, and also if they're in school, their grades start to drop off, start to fall. So those are two really common signs that you know your child is not dealing with their grief.
Okay, do you think that some kids act out and some kids withdraw?
Absolutely. Everybody handles their grief differently. So it depends on the person. Usually we find that how you handle everyday crisis in your life is how you handle your grief.
That's good. I like that. So if you have a child that has experienced grief, we as adults, we like to pretend everything's fine and just keep going, and kids don't really have that. Kids are themselves, so basically, if you have a child and you see, that child acting differently, whether it's acting out or just kind of withdrawing, or like you said, you can see with their grades at school, different things like that. It's just when you see a difference in your child, right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's something that can really kind of pop up any time, right? Because some kids will deal with that right at the time of the death, and some kids, they don't really have the option to talk about things. They're not really given the opportunity, and so it doesn't really come up until later. Is that true?
Right. That's one thing we teach our kids in our grief groups that we do, that we try to make sure that they know who they can go to if they have a grief burst, if they start grieving, like crying or whatever. And we teach them, who can they go to in school if they're at school, or who can they go to at home, or, they can have their parents call us. We're more than willing to help.
Right. And I think it's good to address as well, like you're saying, that, the kids need to know that this grieving is a process. It's not just a one day, okay, I'm sad and now I'm over it. Even for children, there are rough days. And I know for myself, when I was younger, when I was a child, and the first death that affected me, honestly, it probably took me 4 or 5 years to completely, I guess, get over that. You never completely get over a death, and that's a bad way to put it, I guess. But to be able to move on, and that can be a tough thing as a child, and they need to know that that's okay.
They need to know that all those feelings they have when they're grieving are okay, because everybody does it differently. Everybody does it in their own time.
Is it appropriate to say to kids at some point you really kind of need to move on, or is that not something you should ever say to kids?
I think you have to let them. I would not say that to them, right away. I would let them have time to make sure that they're healing. Now, when they if they start using it as a crutch or as, a way to get what they need, then I think it's time to sit down and talk with them.
Do you think there's a way you can tell that they're just kind of using that?
I think if a parent knows their child well enough, they can tell.
Right. Okay. Well, talking about kids and grief, if your child has gone through a death recently, they have Camp Bearable. The State of the Heart Care has Camp Bearable coming up in July in Maria Stein. We've been talking about that this morning. And Marlene, just go ahead and talk a little more about Camp Bearable. You guys have mentioned off the air that you give the kids teddy bears and some of those other things. What are the teddy bears for?
We have volunteers at hospice that actually make these teddy bears, because we're called Camp Bearable. So each child is giving a teddy bear that's probably, 12 inches tall, and they're also given a pen that they can, it's like an autograph bear. Because a lot of times by the time camp is over with, they've made a lot of friends, and they want all their friends to autograph that bear.
Right.
Also, Project Linus gives us blankets, one blanket for each child, and they just love those.
Do the quilt.
Oh yes, the kids are given a 12-inch square, and they can put on there whatever they want to remember their loved one by, and then we have a volunteer sew those quilt squares together, and those quilts are shown at health fairs and county fairs throughout the year.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys do a lot for kids at Camp Bearable, and we'll come back and talk more to Larry and Marlene from State of the Heart Care. 7:39, your forecast is coming up in a little bit. First, a song from Brandon Heath. Here's Love Never Fails on Joy FM.